topic to start off with, so we thought we'd start with a site evaluation. I guess I'll give you a little bit of my background. I think they wanted that. For those who know me, I was an ex-state employee, and I've gone through recovery from that. So now I'm back at the county level. But anyway, I've been in environmental health field for about 10 years, 11 years now. Before that, I was in the clinical lab area doing microbiology, so I guess it come natural to stick my heads in septic tanks, but we're not supposed to do that. Currently I'm the environmental health director at Marion County Environmental Health, and we have quite a diverse program, but today we're here to talk about Onsite. So we have Jeff Thomann, and I'm going to let him talk.
I'm Jeff Thomann, Washington County Environmental Health. I've been doing this for a little over 10 years. And today we'll talk about site visits and site assessments and evaluations. I'll let Misty take over.
This is going to be a little fun juggling all the different microphones up here, but my name is Misty Day. I actually started my career as a paralegal. But I came to the Floyd County Environmental Health Agency in September 2008. I've been the assistant sanitarian there since that time. So I guess I put together the PowerPoint here, so I thought I'd let these gentlemen start us off.
All right. Yeah, like Misty said, she put together the PowerPoint, so a lot of thanks to her. And Jeff and I looked through this, and we're going to talk about if there's any differences that Jeff and I do in our respective counties. And really what this is about here today is not just us up here, but everyone out there if they want to talk about what things that are going on in their counties. Regulator, sanitarian, or even contractors. Because we obviously don't have equal representation from counties. So, prior to site visit, a lot of what should be done or what we do that goes into that is do research on the parcel. We're looking at how many bedrooms, what size the parcel is, who the current owner is. We look at the GIS, our county GPS or GIS system, to look at parcel, lot lines, things like that. Anything else that needs to go into that. Then we look up, see if there's any existing documents, permits, if there's well information on that property or the one next to it, and that's really the bigger key, is not necessarily what you see, but what you don't see. And then part of that parcel research is looking at the types of soil. We have that layer on our GIS system in the county, so I can, instead of going to the book, which if you know what I mean by going to the book, I mean, it saves a lot of time. It's really nice to be able to put that layer right down on that parcel. To be able to see, within 30, 40 feet, pretty much what the soil types are. And then Misty put this in about homeowners associations. It's a good point to bring up. I've always said that, we don't necessarily abide by their rules, and we're not bound, but they are bound to the state rules. So they may have something that might be more restrictive, which is fine, but it's not going to be less restrictive. That's how I look at it. And then, contractor requirements met, and maybe Misty can explain what that's about.
Well, we'll have a few slides too that will explain that a little bit later. But basically, you just want to make sure that your contractor who is installing the system is meeting your county-specific requirements, whether it be a license and bond, certification, or any additional requirements that your county would require.
Jeff, do you want to add anything to that? No. Okay. And I guess that question brings up, there are several counties that do require the CIOWTS or some other type of requirement for the contractor to work in their county. We require it in Marion County. It's something new to our contractors. I have several in the room, and I think that we'll see how things go. I know Jeff in Washington County, that's something new, and he can talk about what they're doing there.
This summer, we passed an ordinance within which the contractors will have to be certified in CIOWTS. They'll need to be bonded and also have a license with the county to install septic systems. I've had an awful lot of contractors really like the rule. A few of the contractors do not like the rule. It has narrowed down the number of contractors that we're using, but it's also brought the contractors to the board that actually want to do the work, do it right, and treat it as a profession.
And so, I guess, I'm not gonna go through the slides completely verbatim, but, I guess when I'm doing a pre-site, once we've done a lot of that background work, Brian in our office, he does a lot of that work, and we have an administrative assistant that without her, we wouldn't probably be able to find a lot of things. So, we're going back through the historical records. Once we've done all that, we're gonna set up that site visit. Now, we prefer that we do that site visit with the contractor and the homeowner, parcel owner, or if it's a general contractor, we will look at that. But we prefer to do it with that person on the site, so we don't run into situations. And I'll tell a little story later on. And I think Tim Rosendahl, if he's in the room, he already kind of talked about this morning about if you don't, if you don't do the pre-site, to the best of your ability, there can be some issues. And sometimes even when you do it to your best ability, sometimes things happen. And we'll talk about that a little bit. But, so like I said, we prefer to set it up with the homeowner so that everyone's involved. Now, I don't know about Jeff or Misty, what they're doing, if that's similar, but that way you're getting off the starting block, at a better pace than if you didn't. So, bedrooms, she talks about bedrooms here. That's something that, we usually go by whatever, if there's a closet in that house, in that room, then it's a bedroom in our eyes because it could be lived in. Now, that's how I look at it too. So when we're doing that pre-site, we want to make sure we ask all those questions. They may say, it's just a one bedroom or a two bedroom, and you're like, well, is this other room is a multi-room? Does it have a closet? And they say, well, it's going to have a closet. Well, then we've got to count as a bedroom. That's how I look at it. But I'll let Jeff argue with me.
There's no argument here. I basically allow people to go ahead and tell me the number of bedrooms for that property. It's really none of my business. If it's a person that wants to put in a 2-bedroom system, I'll sit there and possibly say, okay, you'll have to sell it as a 2-bedroom home. That will decrease your value. Sure, there's only one person living in the house right now, but there may be a family of 6 move in later. And the same size tank will be used at the 2-bedroom as the 3-bedroom. Why not just put on a little bit more filled and be able to classify the house and make it actually valued at a higher value at a later date? Most of the people will do that. So I really don't have any problem. I've got 3-bedroom homes that are 6,000 square foot, and I've got little bitty 1,300 square foot homes that have 5-bedroom systems on them. That's what the people wanted. That's what I allowed. We do use GIS mapping an awful lot in the office. If a contractor were to call, I throw that GIS map up, and I can see contours, I can see soils, I can see property lines, I can see bodies of water around. I can do most of my pre-site assessment anymore right in the office. I've been doing it for so long and know so many properties in the county that it really speeds up the process on what you need to get done. Size of parcel. In Washington County, we have it in our subdivision ordinance that we need at least 1.25 acres outside of any easements. We started doing some subdivisions where the subdivision platters wanted to get as small an acreage as possible, and then they would put on a fairly large utility easement around the outside edge of the property. Well, they wouldn't allow us to go into that area with the sand filter because they wanted to keep it open for other utilities. That has caused a lot of trouble. So when we wrote the subdivision ordinance, we said you have to have this much space available outside any utility easements, because we were starting to stack houses on top of each other. And in Washington County, our soils are really, really, really poor, so most of the systems that go in are sand filters. So with an acre and a quarter outside any easements, that has been working excellent. Sometimes we have private wells that are hooked up to 6 different lots, and sometimes we have public water. We always want to verify with the current owner of the property that is requesting that the system be replaced. We've had some issues with time of transfers and stuff, people not exactly telling the other people exactly what's going on. I guess I'll let Misty, on this slide, I'll let Misty go ahead and talk about that.
I guess before Misty starts, I was gonna ask, you know, she talks about 1 acre sites. Our zoning has increased that in our county. We're at 3 acres, for parcel size. You know, I guess, is anyone else out there, what is the other counties as far as parcel size? Have they done any work to increase? I see Donnie 2, that's, Dan's got 1 acre there. Anyone with 5 acres? I know that was, Carrie's back there at 5 acres. Chuck? Okay. All right.
Actually, they've been talking about reducing the size because now we have alternative systems that can go into a very small footprint. So, they're talking about in certain situations like that, sort of pathway water, you can fit a system into that size lot.
And I think that's, key, like Jeff was saying. I mean, they don't want to take as much, more ground out of production, especially if you're in the rural area, farm ground being cheap as it is today. It's I think we're gonna see more and more of that, the pressure gonna go back the other way to decrease the lot size, where we've been increasing it for quite a while because we wanna lessen the density and lessen the impact, into the watershed. But I think economic pressures are gonna put it the other way. That's my opinion, but I'll let Misty talk about that too.
Okay, so in most areas, 1 acre sites can accommodate a conventional system, but as you've heard here, a lot of counties are increasing that, and we've actually taken that step too, and we've increased our zoning minimum lot size to be 1.5 acres as well. So a lot of it is really going to depend on your soils and existing wells within that site. That's going to play a big role on how much land your system will take up. I guess before going out to the site, I also kind of put in there that you want to verify who the owner of the property is. We have regional sanitarian meetings, and at our last one, Worth County brought up a good point. He had a renter actually line up an installation. He was renting the property. Apparently he was mad at the landlord, so for some reason he decided he's going to install a new system, skip out on the bill. The property owner didn't even realize the new system was going in until he got the bill in the mail. So, just kind of double check on who's requesting the system to be installed. The GIS will give you all that information, assessor parcel card. I'm going to go to the next slide. And again, review your county GIS before going out. You can access it through your assessor website. Some counties also have independent access to it. It has aerial imagery. It shows the property lines. We have floodplain maps on it. And we also enter all of our new and septic well information on it. So when we pull up that parcel, hopefully we can readily see most of that information before we even go out to the site.
Yeah, the GIS has really made a big impact. I think in environmental health, in counties that aren't using it, it's not necessarily because they don't want to, but the funding for it is not quite out there like it used to be. Assessors are, I think, driving the bus a little bit on that. They're able to, there's special assessors funds that were able to purchase a lot of the stuff, because it does, if you're looking at the tax base, that's the original purpose. But for us, to me, it's an invaluable tool. I don't think we'd be able to me, it's no different than a 200-foot reel tape. I mean, if we didn't have this, it would make our jobs, a lot harder. And we're with the government, so we want to make it easier, so. I guess, the well information, septic information, keeping records. I imagine there's several in the audience can probably, can state where, when they came into their counties, maybe they only had a box of records, maybe sitting in the corner. Some counties have better than that, some of them don't. There's lawsuits that have been in play because of some of that. I guess, the bottom line is when we're doing things now, the more data, the more documentation that we can do is not only going to help us, but going to help our, our people after we retire, which, that's what I'm hoping for. So, not to die in office. So, but with that, if you have the existing well information, septic information, setbacks, I mean, it's going to make things a lot easier. And, where to locate on the site, where you're going to go ahead of time before you go out there. Soils, and I don't know, we don't spend a lot of time with that. I know they're going to do, Louis Beckman and Chuck, they're going to spend a lot of time talking about soils, and we talked a little bit about that, but that county-specific book, if you don't have that or don't know what I'm talking about, get it. It's valuable anyway, but with it, compared to the GIS, but I mean, it's it's, like I said, available by book, CD, website, that's going to help your soils. And if you can go out and take a soils class, do it. Even if you're not going to be doing that work, it's valuable so that you can interpret that information when it comes into the office. That's how I look at that. Any other comments? Okay. Anything else on that? Okay. Subdivision Homeowners Association. I think I've seen in our homeowner associations in the county I work in that they've backed off of, being more restrictive in covenants, and they've kind of allowed it to be whatever the county or the state laws or rules are as far as code. That's what I've seen. Anybody out there, any other counties have had anything different? Any problems with that? I think sometimes we have issues around more of a protected, like a lake area. Steve Patterson in here. Steve, I know around Lake Panorama, they've got specific ordinances or rules specific to that. So it can impact a little bit, and I think that's more of an education piece that we need to do.
Just doing your research.
All right, we talked about that contractor requirements. Jeff talked about what they're doing. We're requiring the CIOWTS. We're entering the kind of the first year of that endeavor. And I don't know, is Doug in here? How many counties are we at now as far as CIOWTS? 8. Okay. And I think Lynn County, they as well. So we're in Washington. We're getting, we're starting to getting some more. Most of our population in the state is in the eastern side. So I think we're getting you're going to see more and more larger health departments and counties population-wise go to this just because of the demand. I don't know if Misty has anything with Floyd.
We've also had the CIOWTS certification for quite a while, but I do also realize that some surrounding counties may not require certification, but they still require their contractors to obtain continuing education. So that's probably why many contractors are here, even if your county doesn't necessarily require the certification, they do at least have you attend some education. So they're getting closer.
The slides we're talking about now, kind of once we show up on that site, I think we've talked a lot about that already, but I think, the story I was going to tell about, even though you think you've looked up everything, you know where the boundaries are, you know where those lot lines are, you think everything is in place, you've got to be pretty diligent regardless because things can change. An example I have is, I went out on a site, like the first contractor that wanted to take a look at it, but by the time we got to the actual install, it was like the 5th contractor on the site. Now, I went to that site once, twice. Brian, our office, went there after me. If him and I don't communicate, or if we, you know, things change and we don't necessarily know that, there could possibly be an issue. And the issue, and I, you know, Tim threw this out this morning, and I'm, you know, even though you think you know what you're doing, you're still bound to make mistakes. And we have a site that the Corps of Engineers actually owns about 2/3 of a sand filter. The homeowner decided that they would take it upon themselves to create a more vacation type of property for themselves, and encroached about 150 feet onto the Corps of Engineers' actual ground. Not their easement, but their ground. They don't really like that. They actually took it upon themselves to move the boundary markers too. So when the contractor was there and Brian was there from our staff, I mean, you know, he sees the markers or lack of them. Well, they moved them. They've also put a hammock up and a wood pile and a shed and they've been shooting things. There's bullets, you know, 9mm shells all over the place. So, you know, it's one of those things where, you know, things can change, and if you don't, you know, when you go out on that site and then follow up with that inspection, the more you document on that pre-site visit, that will trigger things when you show up. It's like, well, this isn't right, because things, you know, it may be a year or so since the last time you were on that site. I don't know if anybody wants to add to something like that, but, you know, we're correcting it. You know, the contractor, we're working together with the contractor, and the homeowner is going to have some responsibility with this too, because they were there the whole time the system went in the ground. Okay. You know, like I said, we've talked a lot about this. Is there something, Misty, you want to add in there about wells?
I guess during your research before going to the site, I mean, you may find records, but don't assume that there are no wells or existing septic systems because there's no records available. We've run into a lot of properties where we have no record of what's out there, and they obviously do have a well and septic. So just don't make any assumptions. The reason you want to even locate the existing septic system, in a lot of cases, the new septic system will probably be placed in that general area, but you also have to abandon that system in accordance with Chapter 69. You know, we've talked a lot about locating property lines. I did put up here fence lines ? Because just because that's where the fence line is doesn't mean that's where the property line is, and you can maybe confirm some of those issues by doing your pre-site research with your GIS maps. Cory talked a lot about encroachment, and we run into that quite often. So just because there's a fence there, that doesn't mean that that's the property line.
Another one of the issues that we run into an awful lot are road easements. Road easements can be 33 foot wide, they can be 120 foot wide. You want to make exactly sure that the contractor gets a hold of either the DOT, the county engineer, to make sure that you can outlet in that particular location. We've had a lot of issues with that. Digging up old septic systems, old tanks. I've seen coffin containers, I've seen hog feeders used as septic tanks, I've seen plastic barrels, sprayer saddle tanks. We actually dug up through a field and ran into probably a 72 Impala, where they actually run the pipe through the back window, out the other back window, and then down the hill. They couldn't figure out why it was starting to cake up right there in that location, because it was kind of slumping a little bit because there was no sand supporting the pipe. So we've seen an awful lot of stuff out there in the last 10 years I've been there.
I guess I'd also like to point out is when we're working in the smaller lots, you also want to be extremely sensitive to what the other properties are doing too. I mean, if you want to put a system in, you got to make sure you're not only going to be too close to that property as well, but you don't want to be close to a adjoining property owners, as well as, you know, in subdivisions, that's a real issue. So just take a look at existing properties when you're working in those smaller lots as well.
Thank you. Dan had a first question, then we'll go to Jim. Dan?
I'm sure you guys run into discharge pipes on other people's property, and also, discharge pipes going into field tile which runs through other people's property. And, the other thing is discharge pipes being 10 foot off the property line, but the flow goes down on somebody else's property. We could address those.
That's a good point. I mean, I guess we, when we're out doing that pre-site, if we think that any part of that system may be going to have to be located on someone else's parcel, they've got to gain easement, which is fine as long as they have easement to be able to do that. If it's a discharge pipe, per se, then as long as they have easement to have that part of their system on their neighbor, that's fine. I guess, a lot of attention, that goes back to a lot of that attention needs to be made up front, so that when you get out there and do that inspection, then you're not caught with, well, you're gonna have to get an easement before I can approve this, and because what happens then, it probably isn't gonna get done, because you're going on to the next one. That's just the nature of the beast. But
And the point of the actual liquid running
Oh.
on somebody else's property. I mean,
yeah, that technically, the way I've interpreted it is you can run that pipe actually right up to the property line, as long as the treatment system's 10 feet away.
no, I think it's supposed to be 10 feet off the property.
But go ahead, Jeff. I'll let you.
Oh, thanks. If we're not hooked into a tile, we dump 10 foot from the property line. If there's an existing tile that has already come across that field and up into that yard, tile law takes place with me. We hook onto the tile if it's nice and clean. That's just the way we do it. If there's not a tile that has come up into the yard and we have to drain across that property that's down gradient, we get easements from that adjoining property owner, or we figure out a way to put the system in there differently. A lot of times we'll drain it right back out to the front ditch in the front yard. And the county's usually been very gracious about letting us do that.
Sometimes you have to get NRCS approval. If there was ever any federal money involved in that, you can't discharge it.
Okay.
That's a good point. If anyone didn't hear Donnie, I mean, if it's a NRCS funded tile project, then you have to get permission from them before you can hook into their tile. Okay.
Okay. John, did you have a question?
Yeah, throwing out some hints.
Okay.
You have, what we ran into a lot of times in the counties that get a subdivision ready, they have all the flags and everything, and nothing happens, housing slump like over here. What would you advise people to do, or what are you folks to do when you go out to do your assessments if all the marking flags and everything's gone, and basically you got a big flat area like so? Are you expected to find those property pins, or are you gonna dump that back on the property owner to show you where those lot lines are?
We usually require the property owner to do that. And most of the time when they're buying lots like that, the pins are pretty well set or very easily found. And I ask the contractor, hey, let's make sure and keep it within the bounds of the lot.
We have never seen 15 years old or something like that.
I haven't been there that long.
That's a good point. I mean, we actually have required that they obtain a survey if it's any question. And also something I haven't brought up, and this is something that Brian in our office, we've done a lot of work with this area because of some issues, like I said, we've had where we've created our site assessment sheet, another piece of paper, but that is something we fill out when we do our pre-sites. And in that, it has it has a section where basically we check off that we've talked to that homeowner, talked to that contractor about all the different setbacks. We actually have a place in there they can draw a map of where it's going to be when we go out there. Brian, if you something else that's on there, but I mean the main thing is we make them have responsibility in this too. So they're going to sign off on that at the same time we're issuing that permit. So that when that permit's taken out, it's based off of that site assessment as it was when we were there that day. That's just a little bit of, little insurance policy our county attorney would like us to have. Eric, I think, had a question earlier too.
When you were talking about the property lines and stuff that you put on, say you got a bunch of houses in the city limits, and the zoning that they did 50 years ago didn't block lots big enough for a community sewer system, or didn't allow for it, and the city still doesn't put the sewer out there. If you put like a textile filter system in, and there is no curb gutter storm sewer, can you still discharge out into that front ditch area then?
I think it's a city problem. I don't know. I know you're dealing with that one there. That's kind of a sticky one, but I don't,
I have a small community where we actually are doing that. There really isn't any other choice. They do have some old stormwater drains in that community. Hopefully those will stay open. This is an unincorporated community where the county is actually going to be the responsible ones to change out the stormwater discharge. But that town was platted a railroad town years and years back in the 1800s, and the county really doesn't have any, there is not a large enough tax base to really redo those stormwater drains. But it's an issue that that small community may have in the future. But we're at least getting treatment to the septics and getting the waste out of that front ditch. Another one of the things when we do looking at lot layouts and everything, we always rely an awful lot on the contractor. My county does. I'll meet the contractor on site, we'll set up the laser, water goes downhill, but you need to find out your elevations, you need to find out if it needs to be a pump that can be dosed. I rely an awful lot on that contractor, because the contractor in the end is going to be the responsible person to make sure that that water does flow out the end of that pipe or flow into that treatment bed. So I lean an awful lot on that contractor.
Eric, did you have a question? Okay. I think we'll move on from that. This is a topic, soil analysis or perk test, and we have it in here in the context of this to talk about. That's part of that, part of the pre-site or part of the process once to decide on what system is going to go in there. Actually, in the contractor roundtable, they talked a little bit about this perk test versus soil analysis, and and I think there's quite a bit of I want to say discussion, or not controversy, but it's a lot of discussion on if you're actually performing the perk test the way it should be done. And there's people in this room that do those. They can talk about, you're probably going to be on that site for 4 hours at least if you're actually doing it to what is prescribed in the rule. And so that's why a lot of counties have preferred to go away from that, because is it in the reality, is it really happening? Is the perk test being done the way it's supposed to be? So is a soil analysis a better option when it's, even though it might be a little more subjective, that it's based off something that's real? So that's something I'll just throw out there and we'll talk.
We have an awful lot of clay soils. In August, September, if it hasn't rained for a long time, the clay cracks open. You could stick a garden hose in it and run it all day and it'll go away. In March, when the ground is tight, full, April time period, you can run all the water on top of the ground you want. It will not soak up anything. So we're not suggesting perk test at all. We actually wrote it in our ordinance that it has to be a soil analysis. But that's my particular county and that's our particular soil. I know a lot of the other counties have really good soil, so I really don't know what they're doing in those counties.
I guess we also, in the slide, some counties, and I asked this question in the contractor meeting, will allow the installer to do the perk test. We don't actually allow that. We have to have it done by a professional licensed engineer, just to, make it more uniform and standardize it. But I guess that's a question I have too, is how many, as far as soil analysis or perk test, Jeff talked about they've written it into ordinance. How many other counties out there have actually, written that into ordinance, or what are they doing right now? Anybody? Dan?
Just, we follow state code, 99.9% of what we do are substantial, so.
All right. That brings up a good point. I mean, we actually, if you look at chapter 69, if you, we come in when we do our PreSite assessment, we go out and we'll probe use our soil probe and do the best that we can with it. If we know looks like, it's clay, blue, yellow, whatever, we basically will waive the perk test or soil analysis based off of our professional opinion of the site. And right now, we don't dabble into how much it costs for these things, but perk test soil analysis are ranging anywhere from $300 to $400. So I would rather have them spend that money towards their system if we know based off our experience that it's not going to be worth going after something that's a soil absorption type of system.
We also do just soil analysis in our county. We've really gotten away from the perk tests. In addition, I'd like to add that performing a perk test is very time consuming as well. So I think that plays a big issue. So not only are they, and that's probably why they're so expensive, because it does take that engineer or that contractor so much time to perform that perk test. I guess when we do the soil analysis, we generally have a probe that we go out with, but sometimes it's also good to maybe dig a test hole to get kind of a better look at what the soil's doing. And if you have a perk test in addition to a soil analysis, then that's great too, because then you're kind of confirming one with the other. So.
Anything else on that? Yep, Louis.
Do you require GPS in the soil analysis site?
What was the question again? Do we GPS the site?
Yeah.
We haven't yet, but that's something we've talked about. So that are you going after it so that you know that's exactly where it was done?
The case was that the contractor put a home moved the site, but this was he laid out.
Oh.
Then the inspector came in, didn't look right. I was on the phone with the inspector and found out he moved the site. But the GPS was a different story.
No, that's a good, what Louis has said is that he actually GPS the site where the soil analysis was done so if say it was moved or intentionally moved or whatever, that would have something to go back to. We talked about that in the contractor roundtable about a soil analysis and asked the engineers that question. I think Chuck will probably talk about that later on, and Louis, where some soil analysis are done where I've seen them do 3 holes in a row, 4 holes. Well, are they comfortable with that contractor putting that system outside of that? How far outside of that area are they comfortable with? And a lot of the soil engineers will say, well, I'll come back out maybe, or maybe they won't. So it goes back to, should we make the soil analysis be somewhat like the perk test where you have a rectangle and it's got to be within that area? Because I always, especially in our county, soils can change drastically within 10, 15 feet of each other. And you got a lot of fill, you got a lot of other issues to go with there. So, anybody else? Question? Yeah, soil scientist. The definition has been very vague, loose. I guess I'll let Jeff talk about it.
Oh, thanks. One of the issues that a lot of rural Iowa is there are soil scientists available at your local National Resource Conservation Service. I lean on those guys an awful lot. I have in the past. They'll actually come out and do some site visits for you that don't cost the farmer anything, if it's a farmer in particular. You'll learn from that soil scientist. The farmer will learn from them, and most of the time they don't charge you a thing. So lean on your local NRCS office soil scientist, and they'll really help you an awful lot.
Jeff, you have the soil scientists there in your county.
Actually, they're based in Fairfield, Jefferson County. Yeah, and
Not coming out anything like they used to.
yeah, they used to come out an awful lot. I haven't had to request them for quite a while, but okay.
And that I would say that is the holdup too, is we don't have enough of them. So
In Floyd County, we actually go out and do the soil analysis ourselves. We don't rely on NRCS. IOWWA does put on some soil analysis class, and they have Dan Wheeler come down from the University of Minnesota. And if you have the opportunity to attend one of those classes, that's an excellent resource, and we learn a lot through that class. So in our particular county, we actually do the soil analysis ourselves.
Move on.
Yeah.
What happens if a county employee goes out and does soil analysis and designs a system and the system fails? Who's gonna pay for that system?
Mm.
Is it a soil absorption system?
I don't care what it is. Why
Yeah.
why is the county, what kind of liability does the county have in this situation?
I guess we don't do any soil analysis at Washington County, except to say that it's not good enough for soil absorption. Then you put in a sand filter that is not dependent upon it.
You do a lot of sand filters, but what happens if the, what liability does the county have in a septic system?
It's
Well-
right on our permit.
I mean, I'll direct,
You know how hard it is to sue the county engineer? It's awful.
I know I try every day. No, I mean, that's a good question, and I'm with Jeff as far as our county, as far as, we're not designing anything, it's more of a rule out, I mean,
Outside of the state code.
and that's how,
The minimum requirements, and that's what we
I guess that would be my answer to that too, Chuck, is, I had someone ask that earlier. You know, if a system's installed to code and it fails, then at that moment when that inspection was done, that system was functioning or performing as it was installed to code, and the county verified that. And to me, that's why it's so hard to sue the county. Now, if the system was installed and the county said put 500-gallon tank in and 200-foot laterals, then it's a whole nother ballgame. Because then it was not designed to code. That's where, I guess, to me, the defining point is. So yeah, that's a good question. I mean, if you're going to be a county and going to design systems, that's something you need to make sure your county attorney is on board with, because they're going to be defending you.
The other very large issue is we do not know what people are sticking down that septic tank. We've had locations where we'll get constantly plugging filters on the end of septic tanks. Sometimes it's from chemo treatments. The chemo treatments that the people that live in the house are taking are actually killing the tanks, causing solids to flow out of the tank, plug up the filters. We had another time when a guy kept getting his basement flooded because the filter would plug. We did some research. He put a high limit alarm on his filter. 3 a.m. Tuesday morning, water was backing up in his basement. They figured out what was going on. The reverse osmosis was running at 3 a.m. Tuesday mornings, and it would run and agitate that tank so bad it would bring the solids into suspension and plug up the filter. After that, they redirected the reverse osmosis outside the tank. Never had another issue with that house. There's a lot of other things that go along with, at the time of inspection, the system is working fine, but like any filter, if it's an air filter on a car, if you drive down a rock road all the time, it's gonna plug sooner. If you drive down the highway, it's gonna last a lot longer.
All right, I think we're gonna probably move on to the time of transfer part of this, but maybe, and we'll hopefully have a little bit of time we can ask some more questions. But I guess bottom line on the pre-site thing is that the more you can do on the site, the more you do before you get to the site, and then on the site is gonna be better off, and the homeowner, the contractor, everyone involved is gonna have an easier time in the process, so. Time of transfer inspections, and what we put this in here, what we were going after when we brought this up was, I think, we understand, and we're gonna have there's a presentation in the conference talking about time of transfer, what the process of the actual inspection is, but what about once that's done, whether it's the county or really, if it's a certified inspector by the DNR, what are the counties doing with that report? And I think it's probably, I'd like to know, I guess, what other counties are doing. What we're doing is we receive a report from, say, Pella Precast, and Pella Precast, they go through, they indicate everything, whether it's a failure or not. We're going to, I'm going to review that. If it's something that needs to be repaired, then we'll start the process of going after that, or if it's a replacement. I think, and part of that too, I'm going to make a phone call to that inspector. I don't have a problem with calling them and saying, you indicated, that the ground was saturated. Well, what do you mean by saturated? Was it oozing black crap out of the ground, or was it a little wet? So you need to, communicate, and that's what I do. And I think that, I'll let Misty, since we're kind of running short on time a little bit, I think she actually does something a little above and beyond that.
Okay, when we get the report, we kind of compare the report with the permit, make sure there's no discrepancies. We also communicate with the inspectors. Let's see, why don't you go ahead? Okay. We take a look at the inspector's reports, and from there, I guess we kind of look at to see if the system was functioning or not. A functioning system is any system that is adequately treating the wastewater. It doesn't matter what the size is. Failing system, on the other hand, would have wastewater surfacing, doesn't take water during the hydraulic load test, or otherwise illegally discharges to a ditch or farm tile. You can go on to the next one. Let's see. Okay, and then this is where we do something a little bit differently than these two gentlemen. We actually issue a letter with our interpretation of that report. We note that whether the system is undersized, we note the results of the hydraulic load test as well as the condition of the tank. And then we tell them whether the system was functioning or not functioning. I guess we don't really say pass or fail. I should not have put that in the slide. We tell them that it was functioning or it was not functioning at the time of the inspection.
But that's what people ask all the time.
Exactly.
Did it pass or did it fail?
And we do get calls constantly. Well, what does this mean? Does it pass or fail? So, and then we also put down any recommendations that the inspector may have noted. So at least the person who ordered the inspection is getting a letter from the county. They know the county's reviewed it, so it's just kind of a backup to that inspection. I guess when we have, a lot of the septic installers are actually certified inspectors as well. So we like to say, minor corrections can be done during the inspection, but you really want to avoid major repairs. And I guess if you're doing the inspection and it fails, we probably wouldn't recommend that you do the installation too. It's just kind of a conflict there.
I guess, she listed in there the minor corrections can generally be made. Is there anything on there that's, I guess anyone would, agree, disagree, anything in additional out there? Any other counties? What's going on? Okay. Did you have anything you wanted to add to that, Jeff? No. Okay. I think Dan's talks a lot about time of transfer, as far as exemptions go. I don't know, I've seen the foreclosure exemption. I don't know if anybody else wants to comment on that, but we seem to have this has been an ongoing issue in where in that foreclosure, I guess it is. Sometimes, especially if Fannie or Freddie is involved, if it actually transfers to them and then there's actually another transfer to a bank, but then it's going to go to a private sale. At some point, it's not really exempt anymore once it's passed in there. So, a lot of times realtors, for me, they always call and say, well, it's in foreclosure. Well, yes, but it's now passed between lenders, so it's not technically it's now a private sale after that. I don't know anybody else have had that issue lately. It's frustrating for individuals because they automatically are looking at something you know, that they think that it's a foreclosure. So it's just real frustrating, I think. That lineal line of consanguinity, whatever you want to call it. Yes, I think it's pretty clear here. You know, a lot of times people think that it's also between siblings. Well, it's not. It's that lineal line. You know, mother, father, it's down that line. Installations, inspections. You know, we've signed a lot of binding agreements in our county. You know, I think, and that's fine, but I think the key is you just got to make sure you're diligent on following up. What we're doing with that is, I believe it's 30 days out, 60 days out. We're sending a letter then to those binding contracts saying your time is coming due. If you haven't contacted our office, you need to make arrangements and do what you've said under a binding agreement that you're going to do. So, I guess it kind of depends. Like right now, I mean, yeah, technically they can get something done now, but if you got snow on the ground, I'm usually giving them up to 6 months. That's Jeff's 90 days. Anyone else? Anyone? Weather? It just, I mean, I guess it depends on too, just situation. If it's something real difficult, okay, we're about 5 minutes out, so on time. So, you want to talk about Floyd County at all, with that being lenient?
Well, we also enter into a lot of future agreements as well, and we generally go that 6-month route too. I guess I'd like to point out that if the contractor is busy or there's some reason that system cannot go in by the deadline that we set, as long as they're communicating with us and there's a good reason why that system cannot go in by our deadline, you know, we work with them. We're not, you know, too strict on them about that.
I guess that's the key, is the communication. I mean, you tell people, if you get to close to that binding agreement being up, and something that happens, I'm going to allow them some more time. But they need to tell me about before the time elapses and not afterwards. Right. So I guess we got about 3 or 4 minutes left. Is there anybody that has some questions for us, or just in general they want to throw out for the general good? No? Well, great. I appreciate your time, and we'll probably have some stuff on the website. Oh, and leave your evaluations on the table.